was right. I am the best.
And here are your hosts, Jessica Town and Rob Lange.
You're a jackass.
Embrace the madness.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. It is another episode of The Madness, episode 116. I am Rob Lange. As always, Jessica Town across from me here at DETV Studios with our man Dennis producing the show. And a special guest this week, late edition, but a special guest this week, one of the men who was instrumental in bringing us into the Painted Lines family, the one, the only Jason Blevins. Jason, thanks for being on with us.
Yeah, I'm your biggest fan, I think.
I think so. I think so.
I really do love what you guys do. I love your dynamic. I love what you bring perspective-wise, information-wise, and the two of you are great. So you guys know I'm big fans.
We appreciate that. And you talk about the dynamic as we're coming on the air. Jess was making fun of me to start the show, so we're starting off with a bang.
Did you see what you did, though?
It
was too loud, and you moved away from the microphone,
exaggerate.
but you had headphones on. But it was not going to do anything.
We just exaggerate. It doesn't mean anything.
I understand that, but that was not going to help you even the slightest. I thought that was funny.
Well, I'm glad.
As a
drummer,
I'm all for the more dynamics.
It's all about flair. It's all about flair. So we got a great show for you today. Towards the end of the show, we'll talk about the Super Bowl. That's got a little bit of Philadelphia ties to it, obviously, with Andy Reid back there for the first time since he took the Eagles back in 2004. We'll talk about the if it's okay to root for him, the should you root for him question. So all that, we'll get to that at some point towards the end of the show. When we left you last week, the Sixers were not having a great week. And since then, they've had a great week. They've won 4 in a row, as many people will want to tell you, albeit against some teams such as the Brooklyn Nets and the New York Knicks. But regardless, 4 nice wins with a lot of things to be happy about. And it's all, by the way, without Joel Embiid in the lineup. And we're getting near to the trade deadline, so there's a lot to talk about around this team. You know, we're getting to that second half of the season now. And one of the reasons we brought Jason here is there's been a lot of talk of who are the Sixers interested in at the deadline, what are they going to do, and 2 names that have been floated a lot, and now I'm sure, as Jason will allude to probably, this has kind of been out there for a while, but now it's starting to make a little bit more, get out there in the public a little bit. Is it going to be Bogdanovich? Is it going to be Robert Covington? It seems to be the focus is on these 2 men. And Jason, you've kind of really been involved in this. You got some information for us. So let's just start with, kind of how this thing came about and where we are right now with it.
Yeah, so I think if you look at the Sixers, right, and what they do well and what they lack, it really, if you think about their decision heading into the trade deadline through the lens of doubling down on what you do well, and really reinforcing your identity, or trying to shore up what perceived weaknesses you have. And I think the weaknesses are fair. You look at these 2 players, and I think they really highlight and accentuate that choice and decision. However, before I dive into that, I will say I think part of this is leverage and trade negotiations, and I think that the Kings management and the Minnesota Timberwolves management have a big say in this. And I think that the Sixers really have 2 good options. And there are some people over the last week who have brought up Derrick Rose's name as a 3rd option. Personally, I don't think that's a good option, but I do think it's worthwhile from a leverage standpoint.
Okay.
I think that Elton Brand doesn't want to be viewed as being forced to overpay. And some would say he overpaid last year for Jimmy Butler. Mm-hmm. Some would say he overpaid for Tobias Harris. And I think they don't want to be forced into a situation where they overpay. So you've got these sort of 3 directions. You've got a pure backup point guard who can get his own bucket. That's Derrick Rose. Mm-hmm. You have Bogdan Bogdanovich, who is sort of a 1-2 coming off the bench, who can run an offense, who can shoot the ball, who can create for himself and others, but is an expiring contract who's going to get a big raise. It's really a rental. And then you have Robert Covington, who is not a shot creator, and that's where I think people really believe they need to shore up. However, Robert Covington allows them to double down on their identity of playing defense, creating turnovers, scoring in transition, both at the rim and in transition threes. He's also, he is a streaky three-point shooter like most high-volume three-point shooters are, but he is someone that simply cannot be left open anywhere inside of about 27 feet. He can start to create himself, make himself available for a pass and a shot, a catch and shot around 27 feet and step in. So he's not just a three-point shooter who can shoot 37%. He is someone that truly does create open lanes for other players offensively, and he closes those open lanes for the other team defensively. When you look at Matisse Thybulle and what he really brings to the team, you're now saying we can, one, have 48 minutes of that and have 10 or so minutes of double of that, maybe have two of those guys on the floor, and also not reduce the risk of maybe a rookie in Matisse, and he's an experienced rookie, maybe going through some real struggles in a playoff atmosphere. So I think there's a lot of dimensions that Robert Covington allows them to say, this is who we wanted to be walking into the season. We are doubling down on that. This is who we are. Now, if you go to Bogdan Bogdanović, feel free to retort. I know you had some thoughts here.
I'm letting them bubble.
Well, I mean, do you want to pivot or you want to talk about Covington some more?
Well, let's.
You don't want to get him into talking about Covington if there's still more that we need to talk about.
No, let's
there's still more that needs to be said. We need to talk about that before we get into Robert Covington with him.
No.
Trust me.
Let's stick to Covington for a minute because this is going to be a topic. Because there really is, you got two factions of this fan base, and you have the faction who form this cult-like, follow this guy like he's Charles Manson group.
I think that's excessive.
Okay, I don't.
I think comparing Robert Covington's following to Charles Manson is aggressive.
I do not. They believe everything that he does is gold. They believe that he is the one. They believe that he was one of the top, and I've never believed this, and I won't. I know that there's going to be statistical information. They believe he's a top 3 or 4 defender in the league, which I do not believe. Okay, they totally go to. There's a line where you could say Robert Covington's a nice role player. There's a line where, and I said this even when he was here, if Robert Covington was my 7th man off the bench, I'd be a lot more acceptable of Robert Covington. But these guys think he's a guaranteed must-start, play 35, 40 minutes a game.
Who is they? I don't know who these people are. I've never.
Fan base.
Yeah, but I've never met or seen any of them.
Let's talk about how he fits within the context of an 8-man rotation.
Right.
Okay. Let's not think about these players in the context of them playing one-on-one or them playing in an all-star game.
Okay.
You have to think about what value they bring in the context of an 8-man rotation, and then in a 5-man unit on the floor. So where I think people think of Robert Covington as an overrated defender is simply a function of 2-3 years ago where he was the best option on ball for undersized guards.
Okay.
This is a 6'9" 3-4 guy, right?
Right.
We're not talking about a guard, and yet he was put into a position to be the best option at the point of attack. Now, we can think about perimeter defense has been much better this year, but look at last year, how bad perimeter defense fell off a cliff after that trade. Completely fell off a cliff. They did not have the option to switch someone out like Robert Covington and make life difficult for the Kemba Walkers of the world. Now, would he look bad when he'd get blown by a Kemba Walker here and there? Sure, but he's a 6'9", 7'4" wingspan guy. You don't want him to be your primary perimeter on-ball defender, but they needed him to be. A lot of his reputation, negative reputation, comes from him being a streaky three-point shooter because they relied on him to shoot it 9 times a game, and being the best option at the point of attack. Neither of those things exist in the context of this team.
Okay.
Everything that he does well, from shrinking all passing lanes in a 5-man unit off ball, rotating well, defending the rim as a secondary or third rim protector, all of those things have value to this team. So for me, I think you really have to think about him in the role that he would be expected to play. It's just simply very different. And then you have to look at, as much as people focus on what Jimmy Butler was able to do with the ball in his hands in a playoff series, when you need a bucket, he's not that guy. But all of the sacrifices that that team made defensively after that trade, it's just undeniable.
Yeah.
It's undeniable. You're now going to put a 5-man unit out there that there is no one that could be hunted on defense. No one.
Well, so let's listen. He's a good defensive player. I'm not out here saying that he's not a good defensive player. And you're right. There is something to say about the team makeup he was on, and what he was being asked to do was probably outside of his comfort zone. But you bring up he was asked to shoot 9 threes a game back then.
Yep.
I get the idea. How's he going to feel if we tell him, not we, if the team tells him, you ain't shooting 9 threes a game?
Will they tell him that, though?
That's kind of what I'm getting. Will they tell him? Should they tell him that?
No, I mean, he's not going to shoot 9 threes a game. The value, though, is easily, and it comes down to, let's say he plays 28 to 32 minutes. He's not playing the 36 minutes that he was before. But are they looking to get 5 attempts out of him in that time? But the value really is not only his ability to shoot at a high volume, really get hot, and put some teams away in games, but his ability to shoot from the exact spots where this team really needs to stretch a defense out, and that is above the break. They've got guys that can hoist them pretty quick, get them up pretty quick from the corners. What they really are struggling with, and I think one of the values that Furkan Korkmaz has brought in the last few weeks is his quick trigger above the break. His ability to slide into that spot, and Horford, one of the reasons you're seeing Horford really struggle is he is not comfortable in those spots. He's much more comfortable taking a 3 at the top of the arc, and so is Joel Embiid. They haven't had a guy who can really take those wing threes above the break. Covington, those are his spots. Those are his comfort areas where he's going to run down the sidelines. He's going to, in transition, be a trail man to step into some pretty long-range threes. So it's not just the volume. It's not just the streakiness and the – because every guy that's not, Steph Curry is going to have that. It is the locations, because the stress on a defense, the defense wants to pack the paint against Ben Simmons. The stress that they have to send someone to run out on a trailing Robert Covington creates the lanes for Ben Simmons to attack the rim. And that's what you need. You need him downhill fast at 25 miles an hour, running at the rim in transition. So I think he is an extremely attractive add to this. He also lightens the load on Josh Richardson a bit. So you say you need a secondary ball handler. Well, it allows Josh Richardson to play a little bit less with Ben Simmons and take a little bit more of that second unit role initiating offense. So I think it creates more opportunity for him to do that. And that's really where I think the other side of this argument about Bogdanovich is he's a guy you can just plug into the bench and lead that offensive unit. So it's a really different role that you'd ask him to do, and it's a different role that you'd ask Josh Richardson to do after that trade.
Right.
Because now he can become much more of a two-guard, look for his own shot, become a primary scorer versus an initiator. And there's a valid argument to be made there.
Okay. You got anything?
I
want you to talk. I don't want you to feel like you can't talk because
I know I
my
can
favorite
talk.
player ever is being talked about. Couple things. You mentioned Matisse Thybulle.
Right.
Okay. More of a devil's advocate type of question than necessarily something. But what do you say to the argument that bringing in a Robert Covington could not stunt the growth of a Matisse Thybulle, but maybe slow it because you're not going to be able to have a Matisse Thybulle out there, playing because do you think Thybulle and Covington kind of mirror each other? And I know that right now Covington's a better 3-point shooter than Matisse Thybulle, and Matisse has hit his fair share of shots this year. Like, to me, are they too similar
Let
players?
me ask you this.
Okay.
Let's go back to last year. Did J.J. Redick stunt the growth of Landry Shamet?
Obviously not.
Landry Shamet followed him. He mirrored him. He did every drill with him in practice. He was his shadow.
Right.
And he progressed really fast because of that.
Then we don't get Tobias Harris unless he's included in that trade.
And I'll tell you flat out, the guys that are built with that build in Delaware and the younger guys in the roster are they're told about Robert Covington all the time. Haywood Highsmith will talk openly about his coaches tell him to watch that tape and learn from that because that's the archetype. So that's not going away. They a big reason that they drafted Matisse was because they believe in the value of that archetype. Who better than Robert Covington to sort of come in and allow Matisse to play off of? But, it's really about getting 48 minutes of the thing you really want on the floor, having it for 48 minutes and not having ebbs and flows. If you go to Joel Embiid, what's the biggest downside of Joel Embiid is we don't get to see that for 48 minutes, and the other team breathes a sigh of relief when he leaves the floor.
Right.
There's no sigh of relief around these rangy guys that have their hands all over the place. The other team doesn't get that. So I think there's a tremendous amount of value for Matisse personally to see it, how to play under control, how to get his hands in little spots. Maybe he doesn't foul as much. But it's also protection. It's insurance around him becoming a rookie at some point. He doesn't look like a rookie right now. But, the league has a way of finding the things you don't do well, especially in a 7-game series.
So if Robert Covington came here, is he a guy that's coming off the bench?
I think you just have to think about it as an 8-man rotation.
Okay.
You got probably 4 guys that are locks starters, and then you have a few guys that are horses for courses, like Brett likes to say. So I think there are times where you'd see him start. There are times you'd see Matisse start. There's times you see Horford go to the bench. You have to think about the minutes that he takes are the Mike Scott minutes. He cuts into the James Ennis minutes, right?
How many minutes would you say that you would expect from Covington if he was here?
30 minutes.
30 minutes a game.
If you look at if you just add up minutes per game for Mike Scott, James Ennis, and some of the Neto Burke minutes, because a lot of that, again, will be done by Josh Richardson. If you just sort of work within that concept, you can easily come to 30 minutes. You shrink down to an 8-9-man rotation.
Yeah.
It becomes pretty easy to find those minutes.
I see, and here's the thing, okay? I'm okay with 30 minutes of a Robert Covington. I know you don't believe me.
I don't believe you for a second.
But I'm okay with it from this standpoint. To me, Robert Covington, and I used to say the same thing when Andre Iguodala was here. I thought Andre Iguodala was a perfect piece on a team that was ready to win back when he was here, right? When he was being forced
Well,
to...
there's certainly no evidence that that's true.
No, none at all, right? But, I always thought...
Nothing.
Andre Iguodala should not be the guy. He was being forced to be the guy here at the time because there was no one else, and he would be a better role player. One of the things with Robert Covington was I always thought he would be a nice role player.
Yeah.
And I used to get so much heat for that because, no, he's a starter in this league. I just don't see that from him. He's a good role player. To me, an off-the-bench role player is what I see when I look at Robert Covington.
I think the late era Andre Iguodala comparison is great. I think it's a great, he's probably better with the ball in his hands, sort of probing a defense, but better at the rim. But other than that, like, I think your comparison is really good. Like, putting him into a team that has all of those other elements, like that Warriors team, it just supercharged his value.
Yes.
So I agree with you there.
Okay. See, so I could say nice things about Robert Covington.
This is the first time it's ever happened.
I've said nice things before, but like I said,
it's impossible to remember them because you crap all over him so unbelievably much.
I have had an issue.
He
with
hates like the people who call him Rocco and like think like.
I hate the nickname Rocco. I do.
Me too.
I hate Rocco.
I still don't understand why.
I just think it's stupid. Same thing why I hated Cannonball and all that other stuff.
Well, Cannonball's
I just all that stuff. Like no, I don't.
If you want a clue into guys that I don't like watching play, just count how many dribbles they take before they make a decision. It's real simple. Like, if you're gonna dribble 20 seconds, I am not interested in you as a player.
And listen.
Don't watch high school basketball.
No.
Don't ever go watch a high school basketball game.
But it's
depends on where you're watching.
It's infuriating.
So, like, look, Robert Covington on this version of the team is not as maddening to me, okay, as a few years ago when I believed Robert Covington was the best player on a bad team during those early years of the process. And because of that, I felt certain statistics, offensively especially, kind of got blown up because, like you said, they were looking at him for 9, 10, 11 three-pointers a game and all that stuff. And so, where I could see him as being streaky, other people, focus on those games where he got hot. You know what I mean? And
well, I was in the arena. I mean, it's like if he missed 3 in a row, people would.
For his early years, in his early years like, especially, guys, people really attacked him.
Jakar Sampson's on the floor.
Relax. Yeah. I mean,
they were winning 10 games.
Chill out. Who else do you want to take in the shot?
I got to tell you right now.
Call anybody out of the stands. Any of the 16 people that are there, go ahead.
The mental debate I'm having, and this is why.
And he's a fantastic teammate, fantastic person.
I always said that.
He lived next door to one of my, a friend of a friend. Like, I walked by his apartment when he was, before he got the contract and bought a house and then got traded. But she said he was always nice.
Yeah, no, he never. I always thought he was a good teammate. You could tell. You remember when they used to do the thing behind Molly Sullivan, like they would all like stare at the camera, like that was a thing he did. He was big on the Frosty Freeze Out, like that was his thing.
He's a fantastic guy.
Yeah.
I think the one other thing to throw out here before we should talk about Bogdanovich.
Absolutely.
Because that could really happen. Low integration curve. So you bring him in, he already knows all of the sets. There's no miscommunication. He knows the defense. He knows the offense. He knows where to be. No growing pains as far as figuring out how he likes it, where he likes the ball. Bogdanovich is a really talented and really smart player. These guys, when they're 26, 27, I think he's 26, 27, they've already been professionals for, a dozen years often.
Yep. Right.
So they are wise beyond their years from a basketball standpoint. They've seen a lot of things. But you're bringing in a guy who's never played in this scheme. He's never played for any of Brett Brown's sort of coaching tree.
Right.
Even adjacent people.
Yeah.
Right? The entire philosophy in Sacramento around offense and defense is completely different. And European basketball is definitely different from how they play here. So you're going to bring a guy in, and you're bringing him in on the off the bench, and he's going to be able to run all of your basic sets. But you've only got now 3 months or so before you really have to have something built to use what he does well. At a real, at a theoretical level, it all makes perfect sense. But you got 3 months to say, okay, this is exactly what we need you to do, when we need you to do it, if then else, if they do this, you do that, and have the other players know exactly when to cut, when to do a back screen, when he likes things, what angle he likes a screen on, all of those little things in the middle of the season where you don't have practices is harder to find. So as much as he is a fit where I would say you get Bogdanovich for $8 million last summer, amazing, awesome pickup. You get him in February, it's not a slam dunk. It's not a slam dunk. So it's a great theoretical fit that you hope really works. And you saw with Tobias Harris last year where, you know, his spring really wasn't the full experience of what he can do.
People were pissed about it. People were pissed about it. Pissed about it in the playoffs, and then they were pissed about it when they gave him $180 million. Because they're idiots.
Because you're still trying to figure out exactly how to leverage what he can do well while Jimmy Butler wants the ball and get everybody getting
Right.
And then you realize that two of your players are
let's face
under
it,
contract and no one else.
When you look at last year, that was a hard thing to try and get to see the Sixers accomplish when you basically had 3 teams in the course of one NBA season. No one wants to bring that up. All they want to bring up is, the Sixers lost in the second round. You basically had 3 versions of your team in one 82-game season, and you had to put all this stuff together, and
it almost worked.
And it almost worked. You were a quadruple doink away from an overtime in Game 7.
I was just saying this the other day. Take that shot out of the equation. How many shots did Kawhi Leonard? I was in Toronto for that series. How many shots did Kawhi Leonard get off just over the outstretched fingertips of every defender they put on him for the entire season? How many pull-up, mid-range, terrible analytic shots did he make? Shot like 60%, right? From like 18 feet on pull-ups in isolation. How many of those shots did he make? That's how close they were.
Yeah.
Because if he shoots 45% on those shots, like any human, or even like a regular version of himself, that's like a 45% shot for an elite ISO guy.
I'm still convinced
They go to the finals. So he made the one amazing shot, but he had made 30 amazing shots over outstretched fingertips leading up to that.
Right.
That's how close they were, despite all of the change. This year, you have an opportunity to really have a lot less change. It really comes down to how much do you believe in the overriding philosophy that you walked into the season with, which is we're going to be bigger, we're going to be longer, we're going to turn people over, we're going to defend. If you believe in that still, and these road losses haven't shaken your confidence, then you go with a Robert Covington, all things being equal. If you don't believe in that, then you have to go to a Derrick Rose, who I wouldn't touch personally based on, I know he was found innocent, but generally by default, I'm going to believe her.
Okay.
And I really just have no real interest in having to be in the room with a person like that, and now I have to question whether I bring it up or not.
Okay. I get that.
So
I get that.
does the value, the possible value that he brings on the floor, maybe he's better than Burke, outweigh all of the other little things that can undermine a team's success? No. To me, it's a no-brainer. They want to use him for leverage. They want to use Detroit for leverage in these other negotiations, fine. But Bogdanovich is interesting. But they're not really, it's going to be really tough to bring him back next year.
Right.
So,
well,
I think it's pretty clear where I would fall.
Yeah.
If this was all things being equal, but often things aren't equal. You know, the Kings management is going to have their goals. Timberwolves are going to have their goals. And you have to see what's the cost.
Right.
I think the cost is pretty fixed. The Sixers have sort of a block of 4 players, I think, that are going to be available. So you say any deal, we should just be clear, is going to be Mike Scott, Zaire Smith, and one of Jonah Bolden, Raul Neto, and maybe a Trey Burke, or a Trey Burke. One of those 3.
Right.
Right? The first 2 are going. Like if they make a deal, they're going.
Yeah.
So that's how you match the salary. It's that really who's that third person, and do you add a pick? Now you say, how much do you believe in this team to go all in like that? You're now sacrificing a 20-year-old who's essentially a first-round pick, and possibly another pick, and your financials heading for next year are so constrained that essentially your top 7 guys, everyone after that on your roster is going to be a minimum contract. So what does that look for years 2 through 4?
Okay.
Are you comfortable having those guys for the next 4 years with just veteran minimums, whoever you can get? That's the question.
Before, Jess, I'm curious. I'm curious. If you look at it, right, and say that it's Covington, it's Bogdanovich, okay, which route do you want to go?
Personally, I would go Covington.
Okay.
Just because the biggest thing that I didn't want this year was I didn't want to have this problem where they had to do something at the trade deadline, mainly because we watched that twice last year and it was just so painful to go through, and I can't listen to, oh, we'll have it together by this point. And it's not. Like, I can't do that again. I can't deal with that again mentally. Like, it's too much for my mentals. But also it's the simple fact of, like, it's also the contract stuff. Like, that part of it, because for the last how many years now have we screamed, oh, well, if they had a better bench. Well, if you're going to pay all of these starters X amount of dollars, and then you can only fill it with whoever's willing to take a vet min contract, which doesn't even keep you somebody like TJ McConnell, what are you going to have on your bench? Nothing. You're not going to have somebody to back up Joel Embiid. You're not going to have a decent version of a backup point guard. What are you going to have? You're going to have a bench full of Owl Netos. Is that what anybody wants? No.
Right. But you are a really attractive
that's kind of where I was going to get to.
Destination in a buyout market every year. So you can bring in your Bellinellis and your Ilyasovas.
But they're never going to be an attractive destination, period, because no one wants to come to Philadelphia. And I don't mean that in the sense of, like, no one wants to come play for the Sixers or compete for a championship. Philadelphia is not a sexy destination city for someone to choose
but when you
spend all winter here.
When you talk about veteran minimum deals, say this team goes the Bogdanovich route, right? And say they go to the NBA Finals this year.
Right.
They don't have to win. I don't care. They go to the NBA Finals this year. Bogdanovich is going to get a lot of money. They're not going to be able to pay him.
Right.
The veterans that might take a veteran minimum deal are probably going to be better players than what you've seen over the last couple years, because now they say maybe they're the veteran that says, and there's a few out there. I know that most of them are driven by money, but there's some guys out there that, damn it, I want to win. Like, I want to win, and I want to win now, and maybe they sign on. So maybe the bench tremendous? No, but maybe you can get a serviceable backup center or a serviceable backup point guard.
Yes, but we say that now, and then we get to here and going into everything. We thought last year that trading for Boban was going to be a serviceable backup center. Was it? No.
When you found out that when they were playing centers that went outside, no, it was never going to work.
But what I'm saying is we can sit here and say, oh, yeah, I'm sure we could get one, but then we're going to get to this point of the year, and we're still going to be having the same conversation about how much the bench sucks and how we're going to change it.
Yeah, but you could still have that conversation if Covington comes here.
I understand that, but it's a little bit different because the money is a little bit different there.
The money's a little bit different,
and that
what's
gives
he making next year, Covington?
Like 11.
Covington, so
he's got a great contract.
He does. He has a very good contract. So, but I say this. Okay. First of all, you said basically the argument, the debate, and it plays into what the other management says. But are we looking to upgrade a weakness that we have, which is scoring the basketball, creating your own shot? Or are we looking to double down on what our plan is? Here's the way I look at it. I'm okay with what their plan is, but I don't need to see them double down on it. I think that they have the pieces here to go with their plan. But that weakness is so glaring to me when I watch, when they go on these, when, a little thing on Comcast Sportsnet pops up, Sixers scoring drought, 8 minutes, or, something. That I need a guy that I know can score the basketball on that second team. But what we talked about last year, the trade deadline, you didn't just add bench pieces. You added a starter. The whole dynamic changed. You're adding a bench piece. It's not like Bogdanovich is going to come in here and he's going to become a starter, and now we have to rework our starting five and all that.
But you can't add a bench piece that plays a completely different style of offense. You can't have two completely different offenses being out there, because then that screws with every single different combo of people that's going to be on the floor. Right. And that's, I think, the biggest issue, and why sometimes we don't see any of Trey Burke, because he plays a completely separate offense than everybody else, and that what Brett Brown wants to run.
I think a lot of this Trey Burke Neto argument that's happening, and why is Neto playing? I think a lot of this is to showcase him right now. They want people to see.
No, but there's but that's why Trey Burke didn't play up until a certain point anyway either, because he plays a different style of offense, and they couldn't put him on the floor.
To me, though, right now, Neto is playing as a show. I think they'd rather leave Neto and keep Burke and let Burke play a little bit and play those.
But that's now
7 to 9 minutes.
But we talked about why he didn't get out there.
There's a flip side to that. There's also a possibility that a Trey Burke, he spent two months not knowing where to stand, where to be, what to do, and then he figured it out for a couple of weeks. But Trey Burke is kind of like current Isaiah Thomas, where, all right, if he winds up on a scouting report of the other team, they can turn him into a bad player real quick. You got a couple of weeks where he was surprising people. They weren't thinking about him. They weren't planning on him being out there. And he had a couple of nice games. So maybe you're showcasing him by locking in the good tape and saying, the last time you saw him, he was good.
Okay.
Because we didn't show 4 clunkers after that, where people started realizing he was on the floor. There's a lot of that stuff where, are you in the scouting report or not? And some guys can really do well when they're not in the scouting report. And the minute they show up, the other team makes a small adjustment and they're trash. So I don't know which is the case, but I do believe that both of those possibilities exist.
So I guess my point is, I think that their game plan can work with the top 6 guys when Embiid's healthy right now. Yes, does Covington make it so? Does he double down on that? There's no doubt about it, he does. It's my personal opinion where I'd rather see them address a weakness than double down. And like
it's valid.
And to me, and this is probably where I get caught in the young man's game, right? I don't like these. I love the deep. Like, look, the last 4 games, the thing that has stuck out to me is the fourth quarter defense, especially down the stretch, last 4 or 5 minutes of a game, where the locked in. I mean, and where I notice it? I notice it in Ben's movements, his footwork when he's on the ball, and he knows that guy wants to go baseline. He's 2 steps ahead of the guy with the ball. Like, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. But what that tells me is defensively they can do it with the guys they have. I need a guy down that other end, so that when Tobias takes that shot at the end of the Knicks game, I'm not like, is it good Tobias or bad Tobias? You know what I mean? I want that.
I hear you.
Yeah. I mean, that's just why I'm on the. It's not that I hate Robert Covington. That's not why I'm making this decision.
It is.
It's just.
It absolutely.
It's not though.
It is.
It is because I don't see. Look, and I'll live by this. I don't think Robert Covington is a tremendous 3-point shooter, and I think he's a high volume guy. But I also think his shot selection can be really bad at times.
Let me throw one other thing out at you. One other bonus here. If they generate more turnovers, they get more points in transition. That is more trips down the floor that Joel Embiid doesn't have to actually run all the way to the rim. Take the beating on the block and take the physical pounding that results in fatigue. And you have a fresher Joel Embiid. Even if he plays the same amount of minutes, you have a fresher Joel Embiid in those last 2 minutes of a game to take you home, so that Tobias Harris is not your plan A. You have a fresh guy who is your franchise superstar who has had to do less and run the floor less. The more, and I've been a believer since the beginning of this season, really since they constructed this roster in the summer, that this is all going to come down to how many times they can turn the other team over, how much they can score easy in transition. So which is the guy that does that for you? Presuming that they need to be in a half-court offense and grind out possessions in half-court offense is a losing game the way that they're constructed. You might as well just go small ball. So
The
It's
problem
pretty clear
is,
where I fall on this.
Yeah. I just see the problem is, and look, I guess things can change, but playoff basketball is going to come down to half-court possessions, whether you want it to or not. I mean,
But look at the teams that are really threats: Lakers, Clippers, Bucks. Those are the three teams that are true threats.
Right.
How do the Lakers get their offense? Pick and roll, running through LeBron. LeBron has to go through waves of defense. How do the Bucks get their offense? Giannis penetrating, kicking out to open threes. Waves of defense, waves of hands making him uncomfortable, making him be the guy that shoots from outside. We've seen that blueprint on Christmas. And then you have the Clippers, who they're just take Kawhi out of it, and they're an undersized team relative to the Sixers. So if you look at what gives you the best way to deal with those three teams that are the true threats, barring a weird James Harden run, I guess. Yeah. But who are the teams that
Just
really give them
James Harden.
I can't stand the inefficiency. It just makes it's not sustainable. It makes me so mad.
I can't watch it.
Did you see? Wait, and Russell Westbrook too. Did you see that on
joyless.
Monday? Did you see on Monday night he had like a 32-point triple double, and people were like, ESPN was posting it like the best point guard in the league, but he was like 10 for 25. And Ben Simmons had a 34-point triple double with 5 steals and was 11 for 12 from the floor.
Yeah. Joyless basketball.
And 10 for 14 from the
line.
I
find it very tough to watch a Houston Rockets basketball game.
I can't stand it. I don't watch it unless the Sixers are playing.
Yeah, it's a really hard game to watch.
It's so ugly.
Let me ask you this, Jason.
Yep.
What do you think the Sixers, which move do you think they favor? Do they want to just double down on this and get Robert Covington in here?
I think they have my sense is they have a package that they've offered. Whoever takes that package first, they're comfortable going with.
So they're comfortable either way. They don't.
I think that honestly, that is what I believe.
They say if we get him, this is the plan. If we get him, this is the plan.
Yep.
In essence, what's the easiest deal to that? What deal do you think has the better chance of knowing some of these other, front offices, situations, but these teams have?
Well, I think the Kings just freed up a roster spot. So one of the things we're talking about is moving 3 players to get 1 player. So you have to have roster space, right? And the Sixers are very motivated to package guys because they want to create a roster spot for Norvell Pell, and they don't want to have to cut a guy with no value. So the Kings have an open roster spot. How tolerant is Minnesota to giving up on someone deep on their roster? That's the big question for me. I think the Kings know that they're at risk of losing Bogdanovich after the season. So unless they really want to go all in with him and keep him on that team, I think they're the more motivated seller.
Okay.
But Robert Covington has really had some struggles in Minnesota from a psychological standpoint.
Wouldn't you?
He's had some depression. He's he struggled a little bit there, and they may, he may want out. So
I don't blame him. Minnesota sucks. I mean, like, the people are wonderful.
They are.
People are very nice over there, but Minnesota in the winter just sucks.
See, I've only been to Minnesota in October. I had a great time in Minnesota in October. It was a lot of fun.
I was in Minnesota in February. It sucks. It sucks.
You were also there in one of the coldest times ever in Minnesota.
Yeah, it was negative 25-degree wind chill.
If I was Elton Brand, I would be sending Minnesota highlights of the game Jonah Bolden played in Minnesota in March.
Not the one from the
every
other night.
Day. No. I would send them that game film in Minnesota as he pretty much locked up Karl Anthony Towns.
Anybody can lock
and
up
hit
Karl
6
Anthony
threes that night. I would send them that game film every night.
Yeah.
And say, remember this? Remember when he did this? Maybe it's just the lighting in the arena. Maybe he just needs.
Maybe he just loves Minnesota.
Maybe he just loves Minnesota.
Maybe Minnesota's what brings Jonah Bolden's
Something
best
about
game
that
out.
background lighting for that rim. He's locked in. But I really think it's going to come down to which one of those other teams wants to make a move, and it's a possibility that it's neither. And then you have the buyout market. You have Alec Burks, who we haven't talked about from the Warriors, who is getting more expensive, I think, but he's expiring as well. So they have a few options.
Is there any way they stand pat? I mean, they're going to do something, aren't they?
There's a chance that they stand pat and hope for the buyout market. But I look at that buyout market, and I think, who are these players that are becoming available, and how
Right.
will they fit? I'm
Right.
not seeing a buyout market that changes the needle. It changes the needle for them. So I think they're motivated to make a move.
Yeah.
Motivated enough to put a 20-year-old, very athletic prospect who's now starting to shoot the three pretty well on the table for that.
But it comes down to, I think that you had tweeted this out. The shame of it is with Zaire Smith is their time frame is different from
Yeah, I wrote
necessarily
about
waiting
this in
for him
December.
worrying about him or being able to wait for him, right? They need somebody now. He may not be that guy yet, so they got to do something to bring somebody in. And it's the unfortunate business of the NBA. If this was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when they're in the process.
Well, if Elton Brand and Brett Brown were 100% secure in their job, maybe they're more willing to wait.
Yeah.
His
Good point.
trajectory
That's a great
is
point.
positive. He hasn't flatlined as a developmental prospect. However, if he's not ready to help them while they still have a job here, then he doesn't have the
expendable.
same level of value to them.
Right.
That's true.
And the owner may feel differently, but the owner gets scouting reports from the front office. So if all of that front office is going to give them the information, then I think you have to factor all of those things in. Job security is absolutely a big factor when it comes to making decisions.
Is a deal more likely to happen sooner rather than later, or is this something that we're going to have to wait up until deadline day to see them make a meal or a deal?
Am I going to wake up at 2 a.m. or wake up to see
Probably.
a notification from 2 a.m. that half the team's gone again?
Yeah, I think there is, Norvell Pell's last night of NBA eligibility is tonight. They purposely didn't convert him on the 15th like many of us were projecting, solely because of this contract negotiation, this trade negotiation and leverage. They didn't want to sacrifice leverage. So they didn't want to have to get rid of one of the guys they might be able to package. So, they had a little bit of pressure between up until the 15th. That was released for the last week or so. And then I think it turns up again tonight depending on how close Joel Embiid is to returning. So after tonight, he plays. How far away is Joel? I've heard everything from, 3 to 4 weeks, which brings him close to the All-Star game, and then he's got to get back in shape. So, you could see something pretty quick, but most likely someone is going to blink at the deadline.
So
Sacramento, if they don't think they can keep Bogdanovich, if they don't think they can keep him, they're going to get some value back. And Zaire Smith would be a great value in return. So I could see them doing it, but they might wait right until the end.
Because of Zaire Smith, do the Sixers have what would be considered the best package from other suitors for Bogdanovich?
I don't know.
Yeah, that because that's the other. We're talking about
Dallas last night. They were one of the other people that look like they want to make a move, but they just lost their starting center. So their bigger priority is get a pick and roll, lob threat center that can protect the rim. That's a much bigger priority for them than to get a floor spacer. So that takes them out of the Covington and potentially the Bog.
So that's it. Who else? Who's a threat to the Sixers as far as other teams are going for a Bogdanovich or a Covington for that matter?
So who's motivated? Houston. They don't need Bogdanovich, but they, Covington helps that team. I can see that. But they don't need Bogdanovich.
Right.
So I think Bogdanovich's market is smaller.
Okay.
And therefore, I think they have less leverage. And they have the open roster spot.
Right. So, I know that you lean more Covington, I lean more Bogdanovich. If you had to see one deal going down, do you see it more, the Bogdanovich has more avenues to happening
has more avenues to happen
than the Covington one at this point. Well, it's going to be interesting.
Timberwolves don't have to do anything.
Right.
They have no real pressure to do anything.
Right.
They should.
They should.
They should have pressure to do so. I mean,
But
they're not good.
But you start in a different spot if you're them. You tear it down and you start with the guys that are really making you bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you want to start with your big names. You can maximize the what you're going to get back for some of those bigger names. I mean, obviously Karl Anthony Towns being the biggest one. I don't know what you get for Andrew Wiggins at this point. Probably not a ton because of numbers and all that other stuff. I can't imagine anyone's willing to give you a lot. Man, it's so funny, right? And this is the way that the draft works, and it is crazy when you think about that year. Yeah. How Philadelphia thought, how in the hell did we get screwed with the third pick? We could have had Wiggins. We could have had Parker. Now we're getting this guy that's played 1 year of basketball and he's broke his...
People thought? Was that a thing people thought?
Oh, that was a thing. That was a thing.
Yeah.
That was a thing.
People didn't know.
And I mean, I can remember getting a Sports Illustrated around that time with Wiggins on it, and it was the next LeBron, right? I mean, they had this guy.
I'll tell you, my first Joel Embiid story was a friend of mine, and he watched college basketball. I watched. We were playing disc golf at Iron Hill out in Newark, and talking about Wiggins, right? I hadn't watched them yet. It was like December that year. I'm like, yeah, this Wiggins guy. He says, yeah, Wiggins. Watch this Joel Embiid. And I watched the next game. And what I saw was the perfect specimen of an NBA player who was a little too passive, a little too indecisive, and then this skinny guy who had like this wiggle in his shoulders
I've never
and
seen
was
that.
massive. And I was like, oh. From then on, it was...
I can remember watching the tournament that year.
No doubt for me.
I can remember watching the tournament that year and watching Embiid on the sideline because he obviously wasn't playing.
Yeah.
And just thinking, Kansas wouldn't lose if he was playing. Like, and for Wiggins at the college level, Wiggins was, he was better at the college. He was such a good college player.
Because he's soft.
So, but
you can
Wiggins,
play in college if you're soft.
but Wiggins and Embiid together, no one would have beat that team in that tournament. Like, it just would not have happened. There was nobody else that could defend Joel Embiid in that tournament.
Well, and he was like, we talk about trajectory for Zaire Smith. The trajectory just over a couple of months with Joel Embiid from being like really raw and not knowing what he was doing to being unguardable at the college level happened so fast. It happened over about 12 games.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an anomaly. It was like, not he's having a couple of games. He couldn't be guarded.
No.
It happened so fast, and then he got hurt.
Yeah. But,
our fortune.
So, yeah, I mean, listen, we talk about all the bad luck we've had in the draft. That was one year where things actually broke in the Sixers' way, and you may not have known it at the time.
Yeah, but that's the thing. We look at it and we're like, okay, they get hurt every year, but look what we have.
Yeah, and that brings us to the other guy, right? That brings us to Ben Simmons. And you are how do I say this without coming off like a jerk? You are a rookie NBA fan. If you can't appreciate the things that Ben Simmons does on a basketball court, if you focus solely on the one area where everyone has said they like to see an improvement at some point, but
you don't know anything.
The defense, the court awareness, the vision, the ability to get to the hole. I tell you, the most frustrating thing with Ben for me is not as much a jump shot as it's when he drives the lane and then does that 180 spin and throw. That drives me more nuts than him not shooting a jump shot.
Totally.
That to me, and you've seen that less and less. He still has it. It's still there. But you've seen that less and less, especially the last 4 games. The head of steam he had on that I don't know if it was the first game against the Nets or if it was against the Knicks where he did against the Bulls. We did the 2 dribbles and then dunked on, what's his name's head.
That was the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
2 dribbles to go 3/4 of the court.
I don't think you understand. And he decided late that he was going to try to block that shot. He should have just kept his arms down.
Yes.
The things I wanted to see from Ben, the big questions I've always had nothing to do with everything everybody else talks about. Is one, he's a point guard, has to be a great communicator. So when he drives in a lane, jumps, turns around looking for an outlet, I wonder if he is communicating with his players where I expect you to be. When those turn into turnovers, it's because people aren't where he's thinking they should be. And he might be right, but as a point guard, you have to communicate, This is where
Everything
I
with
need
them.
you.
Yep.
You talked about the if then else, right? If this happens, then I need you to do this.
Right.
If they adjust this way, I need you here. I want you back cutting under these circumstances. I want you popping in these other circumstances. Does he communicate well enough with his teammates to do that? We know he doesn't. He's not very talkative with us. But does he communicate with them?
I think you're starting to see that more and more.
Yeah.
You start to see
I
it a
agree.
little bit after turnovers. You
Yeah.
see him going to whoever he thought was going to
Well,
be
that,
where.
that's development in a young player's game.
That's growing
you know,
up.
We forget how young he is.
Can we just talk about the fact that men don't grow up at the age of 23? Do people just
Hey.
pretend that doesn't happen when
Some
they're
of us
NBA
do.
players?
What age do we grow up?
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's not
35, I'm still
23.
waiting.
Should I let you know? Should
Like,
I let you know?
But you don't start maturing in
No.
any level at 23.
My
Well, that's
wife's
why
still
it's,
waiting for me
it's,
to
it's
grow up.
so
Yeah,
it's
that's-
and look
Yeah.
this right here's the things you hear the most. You hear he needs to shoot a jump shot. You hear he's not a point guard, which you don't understand the point guard position if you don't believe that Ben Simmons is a point guard. He is
Yeah, he's a type of point guard.
right, and
He may not be the type of point guard people are. He's not a Kemba Walker point guard.
No.
He's not a Kyrie Irving point guard.
right. He's and it's like they speak out of both sides of the mouth. Say, well, he's not a point guard, but he could be a point forward. Well, in essence, if you've watched the way that they've tried to play him, especially lately, he played point forward. He played point center the other. He's playing center the other day.
Well, that's
Brett
the thing.
is starting to put him in these
He
different
can
positions.
literally do anything. If he puts his mind to it, he could do
He
anything.
can play offensively,
Except
defensively.
he's not a rim protector, but he
No.
is the queen of the chessboard.
Mm-hmm.
Period. End of sentence. He is the queen of the chessboard, and he's growing into that more and more every day. The other thing I would say with him is he is such a fast. He's so fast with the ball down the court. What he hasn't quite learned to do is to convert the straight line speed into verticality. So a lot of his fancy finishes at the rim, which were like this, and I'm using this hand for a reason, he's starting to get better at and going from here to this and finishing with no doubt. And that is a huge leap for him.
Yeah.
Just being able to do that is going to get him more contact, more free throws, and a higher percentage of finishing
Which
at
is-
the rim.
yeah.
Those two things, he becomes an absolute franchise cornerstone of a championship level team.
Yeah.
Just those two things. Everything else you talk about is just so secondary.
Yeah. Like I said, no one's sitting here saying we all would love to see a mid-range jump shot in this game, but to me,
Why?
I don't think
It's a bad shot.
I don't think it's
It's a bad shot. Why do you want a guy taking a bad shot, especially if he's not good at the bad
yeah.
shot?
I mean,
If he would just be aggressive for the entire time he's on the floor, and he would play exactly the way he did during the game against the Nets on Sunday, if he would play that way all game, no one would complain.
Well, and
we
you-
talked about
listen.
it last week with Austin.
yeah.
he's a
tonight-
very intellectual student of the game, and he's going to make good decisions. And the thing that he's got to get, and I agree with you, he's got to get to that point where he imposes his will and he says, I know you want to take this thing away. And also, I'm good enough to do it anyway.
Anyway.
And that's what the truly elite Hall of Fame level players do.
What I think he needs to be comfortable with is going to the free throw line. I think everything stems
Yeah.
from there, and if he would just not be scared of finishing at the rim and going to the
Yeah.
line, honestly, I don't care if he misses
you have
every
more
single
you
one.
have more
but he
games at
has
10 to
go for it.
14 and 71% shooting the more you do it. So I mean,
But that's the thing. If he would go and continue to do that, I forget what game it might have been when they played the Nets at home last week, when someone tried to grab him and pin his arms down, but he still somehow managed to get the shot. He's stronger than
Oh,
maybe
my
everyone in the
God.
NBA aside
Ridiculous.
from LeBron
yeah.
and
He's-
maybe Paul George.
I want to ask you this. We asked Austin last week, but I'm curious with you. I kind of two questions, but one about Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons and Brett Brown. What's the relationship? Good? Indifferent?
I think it is Brett Brown is an over communicator. Ben is a quiet person. So it's those dynamics. I think Ben thinks really highly of Brett.
So that's my question because when you talk about the Brett Brown stuff, you have two superstars on your two stars on the team both think highly of Brett Brown. I mean, that's an accurate comment. Joel and Pete too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like they're two guys that if Brett got fired, not that they would like raise hell, but they want to be happy about.
He's the only professional coach that they've ever played for.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's not as huge factor when the front office makes a decision on whether to move on or not, because they think, well, look, you love him because he's
the only thing you know.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay.
He's your first serious girlfriend.
Right.
You know, you love him.
It makes sense.
I'm hoping they're high school sweethearts. They get married and have a wonderful life together.
But if there's a question of like, do they question him the way that like Jimmy Butler did? No, not at all. I think they really buy in. They don't necessarily buy into each other's game as much as they believe that Brett is working to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And Joel just wants to do the right thing. Everyone thinks he doesn't, but he really does want to do the right thing. And Ben is just such an advanced basketball player, advanced basketball mind. I think he gets frustrated a little bit about sort of the fact that Joel is much further behind in his sort of basketball experience level. Remember, he's played since,
not that
he's played 10 years.
Uh-huh.
And he's had to learn a lot of things on the fly. So he's the opposite of Bog, who's been a professional since he was 14.
Right.
Joel really has very little professional experience.
The other guy I wanted to ask about, just because of you've heard things come out of Boston that he said this, he said that. Where's Al Horford stand with Brett Brown, with this team?
I don't know that Al Horford fully buys in or fully knows what is expected of him. I don't think he's really comfortable with the spots that they want him shooting threes from, especially. I think he's struggling to buy in. There was one play that really frustrated me. I think it was against the Knicks late in the game that would have just put that game away, which was a simple pick and roll with Josh Richardson, wide open lane to roll. He popped instead.
Yeah.
Wasn't even open for the shot. It led to a really bad shot. He's just not quite, it's not clicking for him, and he's not quite seeing how he helps. And I think part of it is, we go back to those guys, the only thing they've known. Al Horford was the centerpiece, not thought of as a star, but he was the centerpiece of the offense in Atlanta and in Boston. Mm-hmm. Other guys got more points per game. They got more shots per game, but everything ran through Al Horford. He made all the decisions. He was the centerpiece of both of those offenses. He's just flat out not. He's sort of he's one of the options down the option tree as far as shots they want to get.
Right.
And I don't think he's comfortable yet. And I don't know that that's a permanent situation, or it's not a value judgment.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean Brett's a bad coach, and it doesn't mean Al's a bad player. It also may mean it's not a long-term fit.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I hope it kind of, I hope they find a way to make it work, and I know it's on both parties kind of have to find a spot, but...
The offense has to be, you got two unique players.
Mm-hmm.
This offense creates shots in very specific locations. It's not, this is very much a my way or the highway. Mm-hmm. Ben Simmons needs people to take shots from certain places, period. Mm-hmm. Just for him to get the things that he wants.
And that's probably regardless of who's coaching. I mean, in a sense,
some of those things are regardless of who's coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens there. What do you think, Jess? They win tonight?
Yeah.
Out in Toronto?
Yep.
7-point dogs.
Yeah.
7-point dogs.
I don't care. I don't care.
It's a high line. I feel like it seems high.
I'm gonna answer yes to every one of those every time.
Jess, are they going 82-0?
Yes.
They can't now. So far, me and Jess have been doing
what do you think their final away record is? Do you think they get back to 500?
I do. I think they end up around 500 on the road,
which is possible.
I think you think that is possible. Yeah, and I think that's fine. Like I don't think you
puts them in the 54, 55 win range.
Yeah, look, and that's what you kind of look at this team, and yeah, they've had these lulls, and you get frustrated at times. But you said it before we went on the air. You agreed. I don't, and people are going to tell us that we're nuts. I don't think seeding matters as much.
Right.
If granted, you don't want to be the 6, 7, or 8. really the fight. You like to have home court in the first round at the very least.
Right.
And everyone goes, yeah, well, they can't win on the road. But there's a long time between now and when a playoff series is going to start. So
they also thought they hadn't won in Toronto in like 10 years.
Yeah.
So why
They've
do they
won in Toronto?
Why did they struggle on the road? That's the question. And there's really two distinct possibilities. One is they don't have the energy of the crowd. And when they go into places like Miami or Orlando, or they have dead crowds, they don't have that sort of emotional edge that this team tends to play with. And the Philly crowd really gives them that. Big games give them that. But the December game in Orlando, you don't get any of that. Is that the reason they lose? Or, so if that's the case, it doesn't matter at all for the playoffs. Because everything in the playoffs is high stakes. Everything is high energy. So that one, throw it right out the window, doesn't matter. The second possibility is this team in the fourth quarter makes life really difficult for their opponents. When the opponent is on the road, they don't stand up under that heat. When the opponent is home and has the support of their crowd, they're able to withstand that difficult life that the Sixers put on them and overcome it because they're at home. Now, if that's the case, that's a potential problem in the playoffs. So it really depends on why they struggled or why they lost some of those close games.
Right.
Is it them or is it the other team stepping up in crunch time?
And look, tonight, win or if they lose tonight, there's going to be all kinds of reaction. To me, I'm not even. Obviously, I want to win every time they go out there. But tonight, I want to see if this fourth quarter that they've been putting together over the last few games defensively continues. If Ben has that look in his eye in that fourth quarter, and you got to hope. Look, Furkan has been a bright surprise to many of us. I don't think a lot of people expected Furkan when he left and they came. Remember when he first signed, we were all like, oh.
That's because he puts me on the biggest emotional roller coaster that any man has ever put me on.
Look, Furkan's never going to be this defensive prowess out there, okay?
No, the defense is not the problem.
He's gotten a lot better, though.
He has.
You see the game? He's getting his hands in a little places.
I tell you what, his dunk the other night and the emotion he showed after that dunk was like, I was okay.
Did you see my question for him after the game? I asked him, because right after that, he took a charge against, it was the other team's lead, Zach LaVine. I said, so Furkan, which felt better, the dunk or taking that charge? And he was like, ooh, tough question. The dunk.
The dunk, yeah. He still scored hard.
It was not that tough. It was not that tough a question.
He hasn't been a consistent enough scorer until recently. If he is a consistent scorer and he is consistently making those 3-point shots, that drastically changes everything.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's just down to when his body became an NBA body. It's still not quite there.
Right.
But you talk about strength, like being able to fight through just a little bit of a hand or a little bump and get your shot and still get your hips squared, your feet right, and get your shot off.
He's also younger than Ben Simmons.
Yeah, and
he's 22.
His attack to the basket has gotten better.
He's younger than Matisse Thybulle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his attack to the basket has gotten better too. Him going to the basket, he's finishing a little bit more. I mean, I got to say, when at the beginning of the year when Brett was telling everybody, no, I'm trying to create a Obama, right? Everybody's like, yeah, you might have been on to something. We don't know. This time will tell. There's still plenty of season left.
Every day in training camp, every day he worked through fighting through screens. He worked through contact every single day. That's what we saw him working at. Every game before games, he's working at running around a screen, getting bumped.
Right.
That is like the whole game for him. And as he adjusts to that, as he gets stronger, as he gets less easy to bump off of his spot and his hips, he from the shoulders up, he's a great shooter. So it's all about can he get squared up?
Right. Well, there's going to be all kinds of Sixers talk. It'll be a couple good weeks here, but with the last few minutes of the show here, Super Bowl 54 is set. You know, it's one of those things where if you watched all season, you probably would have thought, well, yeah, this could be it. But I don't think it took me forever to believe in the San Francisco 49ers as a
I really still
legitimate
don't believe in the San
Super
Francisco
Bowl
49ers.
team. And then when you see that they win the game, right? Like, so I watched and then I turned on. When I went back and I looked at the stats, I thought ESPN was mistaken when they had 8 passes for Jimmy Garoppolo because all we're told about in the NFL now is can't win unless you're throwing the ball. You can't win unless, well, Raheem Mostert, former Eagle, 220 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns.
Had nothing to do with him if you watch the game.
Well, yeah, I mean, look.
I mean, he barely got touched.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, Kansas City is so bad against the
You mean
run.
Green Bay. And that's what.
Well, I bet that's, sorry, going into that, yes.
Yes.
And I was having this conversation about Derrick Henry going into that game. But yes, and Green Bay is worse against the run, if you could remember
And
what
look,
the
you remember what the Eagles did to them, and San Francisco just tore them apart on the run. So now you got a Super Bowl, which they're always the fun Super Bowls, right? Where you have the number one offense, the high-power offense, going up against the stingy defense. What's going to win out? But in Philadelphia, there's a different debate. Shocking, right? Andy Reid is the coach, 7th year with the Kansas City Chiefs. It's been 7 years. It may seem like it hasn't been. It's been 7 years. He took over a franchise that was 2-14, and 6 out of his 7 years has gone to the playoffs. He's now been to 2 AFC Championship games with them, and now he's bringing this team built very differently from most of his teams in Philadelphia. I think he's grown, and he's adapted, and he's learned there's certain things I have to change about the way I build a team. He never had that much speed at receiver here with James Thrash and Todd Pinkston and Nay Brown and all those guys. But the debate has become.
I mean, he had Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, but he had for one. But I'm saying, like, do you see the speed at that?
Yes.
It is mind-boggling to watch his team run. Like, it's just out of control. I look at there's 2 questions. There's should we be rooting for Andy Reid? And then the question is, can we root? Like, I'm in the middle. I am not going to tell anybody who to root for. You root for who you want to root for. I don't care. But I don't think you should be shamed for rooting for Andy Reid. And I'm kind of in the mindset now. I'm like, you know what? Go get it.
I just don't understand why the hell it matters.
Well, because it shouldn't now.
No, I'm not saying to you. I'm just saying in general, like, why?
I'll be honest with you.
Literally, who cares?
I'll be honest with you. If the Eagles did not win the Super Bowl 2 years ago, I'd care of a hell of a lot more.
But
and I care a hell of a lot more because it would be like no, I'm a stingy ex-lover. I don't want to see you get it there when you could have. But now that you have one, now that ring is here.
You have one, and it's been 7 years.
And you should take into account he led you through one of the greatest eras of Eagles football that there ever was. You can have and look, I was on board after 15 years. It was time for a change. It was time to move on. It was just one of those things where it had run its course.
Right.
But you can't forget about the year 2000 through the year 2008, really, where they went to the playoffs 7 of those 8 years, I think. I mean, it was a hell of a run.
Yeah, he's a professional coach who the NFL is really tough to be that good for that long. Mm-hmm. Eventually, all of the little tricks and all of the little catchphrases and all the little techniques that you use to motivate people and get the best out of people, they're going to hurt. Mm-hmm. They will have heard 100 times. So, everyone has a shelf life.
Yeah.
But, the guy legitimized the franchise, made it one of the premier franchises in the NFL after, 30, 40 years of very, very mixed results.
Yeah, and he's a guy that has taken 2 franchises from the dumps, because both teams, when he took them over, were in bad straits. He built a quarterback here in Donovan McNabb, and obviously he's doing it with Patrick Mahomes, right? Remember when he made the trade? The draft was in Philly. Everyone said, Jesus, what the hell is Andy doing trading up for this kid? Once again, Andy knows how to coach. He knows how to – and not only that, he's a leader of men, not just his players, but his coaches. Look around the NFL. Andy has a coaching tree. Andy has a giant coaching tree.
Andy has a good coaching tree.
Yeah. It didn't happen in time for his shtick to run out, which everyone's does. But why would you root against the guy?
Yeah, like that's it. Like, I'm not saying you have to root for him.
I get the Chip Kelly thing. I get why people root against him.
Yes. He tried to destroy the franchise.
Well, he had
I mean, clearly,
he had
that's
a very
how-
specific
Yeah.
way that he thought he was going to.
That's how you get to the
Well,
Super Bowl.
apparently,
You
how you
come
get to
in,
the Super Bowl, you got to hire him
you
for a
let-
year and then get him out because the Eagles and now San Francisco's in the
It's
Super Bowl.
well, I would argue that Doug took some of the good things and got rid of all the toxicity and kept some of the good stuff, the RPO stuff. So I think there's some validity to that.
And oh, by the way, the people that hate Andy Reid, Doug's not here without Andy Reid vouching for him to Jeffrey Lurie.
It's okay to get sick of a guy.
Yeah.
It's like you got sick of a guy, you got him out of here.
And now
You
there's
want
this,
him to die in a hole?
like, do you understand how much energy it takes to be that grumpy about
Yeah.
something?
And now there's this narrative out there that, oh, well, he harbors all the worst of humankind. Well, first of all, you can look at it one of two ways. He's harboring the worst of humankind, or he's taking guys, as he did with Mike Vick years ago, whether you agree with Mike Vick, and he's giving people second chances. Because what we forget, or what people choose not to remember, I should say, it's not forgetting, you're choosing. He had a son who had bad vices, and I think he feels when guys have these situations come up,
Yeah.
I think Andy Reid is the type of guy that says, I want to help.
I hear you. I put addiction problems in a very different category from domestic abuse.
Yes,
Abuse,
yeah.
I think it is totally acceptable for someone to lose their primary first option as a career and have to recover life in a different field
Yeah.
after going down that road. To me, it's a red line. So I just put him in two different categories.
No, and you should. I guess my point more so is that's who Andy is as a guy. Like, Andy's a guy that wants to try and bring somebody out and rehabilitate him in his way. And I don't think that should be I guess my point is I don't think that should be grounds for rooting against Andy to win a Super Bowl.
No, he's a professional.
At this point. So, next week, Jess, maybe we'll do some fun Super Bowl type stuff.
Woo! Super Bowl.
Maybe talk some Super Bowl props, since I know how much you love that kind of stuff.
I think they're really fun.
Super Bowl prop bets are good.
They are fun.
They are fun, especially
I won
when they
money
get
one
ridiculous.
year when Peyton won with the Colts. It was whoever. One of them was pick who's going to score the first touchdown. Your girl, smart as all hell over here, picked Pierre Garcon.
I'll probably
and
lose.
Guess who scored the first touchdown of that Super
I'm
Bowl?
going to go ahead and guess Pierre Garcon did.
You're damn right he did.
Because Jess is
Because
right.
I'm smarter than everyone combined.
Jess is smarter than everybody. She's right
Combined.
all the time.
Yes.
Combined.
Smarter than the world combined is Jessica Town. All
When
right.
it comes to this,
Before we end the show, Jason, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
I will say this. You haven't totally swung me to the Robert Covington side, but I'm a little bit more
He's
accepting
thinking
of
about
if it
it now.
happens.
Well, so again, two good options. That's a good place
Yes,
to be,
it's
right?
a good place to be.
Yeah.
So, I'll take that. But, so as you all know, this is now week 3 with the Painted Lines, but to make sure you are subscribing to the Painted Lines YouTube channel. You can catch us there. We now are live streaming. That is all up. Our man Dennis got it all set up for us today. You can still catch our podcast on iTunes and Spotify.
Shout out DETV.
Yeah, shout out to DTV. We're working some things out with them, but the studio's great. We got to bring our banners. You have our banners.
They're in my car.
Yeah, we got to bring them.
I'll bring them in next
We'll
week.
start putting banners up. We're gonna make this a little fun madness
Do I have
studio.
both of them?
You do.
Okay. They're both in my car then.
Yeah. Make sure you're following, getting on thepaintedlines.com. There's been a bunch of good articles going up from Austin, who was here last week. Jason's been writing some great stuff. All the guys over there. We are thrilled to be a part of this, especially coming into now what is the stretch run of the NBA season. It's going to be a lot of Sixers talk, but don't worry. You're going to hear all of our Eagles takes, especially when I continue to preach, forget a wide receiver in the first round. Don't screw this up, Howie. I will kill you. That's all I'm going to keep saying. I'm going to be so disappointed on draft night. I know. Don't you worry.
I told you, just drink as much as I did last
That's
year.
what I'm going to do.
And you'll
Draft
be fine.
night is going to be a drunk night
You'll be fine.
in the Lange household.
You'll talk yourself into whoever they pick.
Oh,
You will.
without a doubt. You should have seen me last year. We did this draft party down at Xfinity Live, and then we went in,
Oh, nice.
and we had been drinking, and I wanted Montez Sweat more than anybody in the world, and the Eagles traded up, and he was still on the board, and I went, here we go. And they
Andre
picked Andre
Dillard.
Dillard, and actually, both of our reactions, 'cause
We both went-
we both had a couple drinks
What?
in us. And
I
we-
had a lot.
and
I
we
drank a
filmed
lot
it. We
that
went,
night.
we went Periscope with it.
Yeah.
And people were probably like, these two idiots, they don't
I
even know what he is.
I am always pro offensive line.
We got some breaking
You
news, though.
must have a left tackle.
Is it good breaking news?
It doesn't really matter.
Oh.
Eli Manning will hold a news conference on Friday to officially announce his retirement.
The Eli train is leaving the
Wow.
building.
Hall of Famer, right?
I don't know how you don't put him in with 2 Super Bowls and playing as many games in a row as he did, and and with the statistics that are good enough to push that. How do you not? I mean,
I don't know if he's first ballot, but I think he gets in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
You redraft, it's draft night, and I know they weren't the same year, but Donovan McNabb and Eli Manning are on the board. It's your pick. Who you pick?
Oh man, see, right now because Donovan annoys me now as
Yeah,
an analyst, I just
as a person.
Well,
really
I think
just
that's really valid. Like Donovan was I think, a much more talented player, but just kind of a shitty team.
Yeah, and he was a passive aggressive son of a what.
Exactly.
Well, he was
as a
just
quarterback-
on a Bleacher
Yeah.
Report
Yeah, rip
podcast.
it T.O. again.
Rip
Like,
it
get
T.O.
over
It
it.
was 15 years ago.
As a quarterback,
Please
you
stop.
have to bring the team together.
Yeah, instead
But-
he says that T.O. broke it up.
He
He
would-
did by creating that dissension in the locker room because it was T.O.'s side versus the McNabb side, and you saw
Right.
what the hell happened.
I'm just glad I didn't have to watch Eli Manning every Sunday.
That's fair.
Yeah, yes. Totally agree with that
drive me
100%.
insane.
I have a lot of
It
Giants
would have
fan
driven
friends
me
that I
insane.
make fun of a lot.
Yeah, it would have driven me insane to watch him and that stupid Eli face and all that other stuff.
I couldn't have dealt with those memes. Like that, again, too much for the mentals.
Absolutely. Too much for the mentals. We didn't put that on a T-shirt. So we talked about YouTube.
And your chicken.
Yeah, take care of your chicken.
Take
care
care.
of your mentals. This is the madness.
This is the madness. By the way, designtree.com/the-madness is still there.
Awesome.
There is still a store page. We would really like to get that thing moving a little bit. I know we haven't really talked about it that often, but still plenty of
Why don't you
shirts
just
there.
move your designs over to our page?
They're-
You keep
what-
all the money and you can market it.
that's a thought too.
That's a
I'm-
thought.
We're
I'm
all
tired
in.
of thinking about it.
We're
thoughts.
You
all
guys
in.
can take it over.
So thanks everybody for tuning in on live. Make sure you're catching the podcast. Check out the show on YouTube. We will be back next week with a little more Sixers talk and probably a little Super Bowl preview. Until then, everyone, embrace the madness.
Good job. That was